thank you very much for coming this afternoon.
Yes, it's a nice Friday afternoon.
I understand you were doing a bit of a tour around the UK.
Yes, I came from Scotland to Durham to Warwick. I've traversed England, but I missed half of it because it was a fog all day. I thought it was pollution, but they told me it was a fog. The entire country was in a fog for about 7 hours.
Welcome to the United Kingdom, I think.
And Scotland was pretty grim. Grim weather. They have grim weather and they wear grim clothes. But it's an interesting place.
Well, let's see if you're welcome back soon. But as usual, we will start with, I will ask a few questions of my own before opening up to the audience for some of your own questions. And we'll jump around quite a bit, if that's okay. So the movie Platoon was drawn from your own experience as a Vietnam War veteran. And one incident you took part in was a New Year's Day battle of 1968. I was wondering if you might be able to share with us your recollections of that incident.
Strange place to start, you know, right in the middle of a bloody battle, I remember it as a very dramatic night in my life. It certainly, you don't go through an all-night battle where basically the NVA, it was a regiment, if you remember, 68 was the peak year, and in January, that very January, was a Tet Offensive. The Tet Offensive was a massive attack on all the US bases across Vietnam. It was a planned attack. We didn't know it at the time, but that was the moment, early January, when they were moving towards Saigon from the Ho Chi Minh Trail in Cambodia. We were positioned right, we would work out of the trail, right near the trail, and there were days we didn't know, there was no border defined. It was just a jungle. So I imagine we'd wander across into Cambodia. So we'd set up a 2-battalion perimeter. Is this too much detail?
No, not
you must
at all.
tell me, I don't know exactly what you're looking for. We set up a 2-battalion perimeter. One was armored, and we were the infantry side, armored with APCs and bigger guns, especially the 50 caliber machine gun. We were in the foxholes on the other side. And we'd been scouting, we felt there was activity. We saw things, but you know, it was New Year's Day, and boom, we got a little drunk. We had a little bit of booze for that. And then the next night, that was the January 1 to 2 night, was when they hit us. And I have to say, I had been in some action already. I'd been wounded once, but this was significant. And they hit the ambush, which went out. The ambush goes out around 5 o'clock at the edge of the night, because they're going to set up in the trail. Several ambushes were sent out. And we could hear the fire as they were hitting the ambush. And they were buried all night. They really got into it. And they just we knew they were coming. And it was a long night. I don't know how much detail you want, but essentially we were attacked by, I would say, about 2,000, 3,000 troops. And we were about 750, maybe 1,000 men. So it was a big deal. And by the time we got into it really deeply, they were into the perimeter. And that was what was scary, because the perimeter is, when they're in the perimeter, means you don't have the same support, artillery support or air support, because you see, the U.S. Strategy in these battles was to bomb the shit out of everything right away. So if you got hit, you basically stayed, and then they would come, and then you'd move out and try to pick up the pieces. In this case, because they were so inside us so quickly, there was enormous amount of artillery, but it was not hitting them. And then the F-16s came. That was really that was different, because the F-16s are really, they were the best of our aviation, and they dropped these bombs, and I think they dropped a 500-pounder. You can say that you talk about reverberation, your ears shake, and sometimes, as you know, there was a lot of that going on where you're hit by your own friendly fire. That's to say, the artillery and the planes come after you, and you feel like there's no distinction. And in truth, that's what happened that night. By the end of it, the armored division battalion was firing beehive rounds across us into them. And at one point in the night, when I was moving from one foxhole to the other, I was carried by a beehive blast across maybe 15, 20 feet, and I don't remember. I did I was momentarily stunned, maybe for 15 minutes, maybe for 10, I'm not sure. But that was the nature of the battle. Confusion, having contact with with the inner perimeter, having contact with somebody who would tell you what's going on. That's always the issue in a battle. You just don't know what's going on. You don't know. You don't know what's going on. And you'd hear rumors, things would fly around like C Company was being overrun, and that's serious. Really, overrun means that they destroyed all the communications and that, but it wasn't true in the end. It just went on and on and on, and I have to tell you, that's a long time, from about 10:30 at night to approximately 5 in the morning. It's 7 hours, 6 hours, and we don't know what's going on. So it was one of those nights, and then at the end, I remember as the dawn was coming up, I think it was 3 of us left in a foxhole, one of these foxholes, because we moved around. And it was still dangerous because we didn't know if they would come again. And there was a lot of fear. What's happening? What happened? Be that as it may, they didn't come, but they did drop the bombs right close to us, very close. And the artillery was enormous all night, out of Saigon and across the other side of the perimeter. The next day, when we went out to reconnoiter, there was 500 of them dead, because we took the bodies and we threw them into a big crater that had been formed in the middle from a bomb. So that was a scene in Platoon, if you remember. There must have been 500. And we're still looking around the jungle. I mean, there was an enormous amount of smell. You smell them, and then of us, we evacuated about 25 dead and about 175 wounded. So that's pretty significant. 175 wounded out of about 800 to 1,000 men means we did take quite a few casualties. I made it through that night, and I was cleaning up afterwards. So you saw the damage. And I was wounded actually in the same place. This is the Vietnam War, the nature of it. I went out back to the same place 15 days later on January 15. And we patrolled the same damn area again. And on that particular day, I was wounded again, the second time, on a patrol. They ambushed us. They got a few of us, maybe 2 or 3 dead and 15 wounded. But these are significant numbers in a small group of men, and it adds up, and it does affect your mind. That second wound is what got me out of the field at that point. I just want to say, historically, the battle was not reported on. We were the 25th Infantry Division, and it was not a glamorous division. There was very little press. We never saw press. I didn't know what had happened. We don't know the size of it. But what's interesting about the battle is that it grows in perspective, because I was approached by a young man who had interviewed a lot of people there and was writing a book about it. And it was the beginning of the Tet Offensive, and we didn't know it, you see. What they were doing, the Vietnamese were doing all through that October, November, December, was gathering intelligence and moving munitions, moving men, moving all kinds of things down to the south. Saigon, if they had cut Saigon, if they cut across Saigon and taken it the way they wanted to, or at least damaged it enough to psychologically destroy us, and cut off our sense of unity with the North, they would have, that would have been the objective. I always believed that all the activity in the North between the Marines, who got all the press, and the NVA, the bombing at Khe Sanh, those battles, there were quite a few battles, ugly battles, but that was where it seemed like the hottest action was. But in a fight, and the Vietnamese were very smart, you throw the left, you'd save the right. And I think the right hook, the knockout blow was to Saigon, because they came so close to taking Saigon. They took Saigon almost the entire night, and it was a bloody battle for Saigon. So that was the objective, and I think we were one of the first to encounter them. The other thing that is in aftermath you're aware of is we kept finding intelligence. We'd be in the bush and we'd find stuff, bunkers, lots of supplies, but we found a lot of paper and a lot of intelligence, which we would gather, and I mean stacks of it, and they would come out. The intelligence people from Saigon would fly out, and they'd collect all this stuff. And I was wondering later in time, where did this go? You know, why were we so surprised? And I do think that we had very poor analysis. In fact, General Westmoreland came out to that battle, and he stood there, and I don't know what he was saying, but he examined and he left on his helicopter. But I heard later that he criticized us for not having been well dressed and not looking like troops, which in a way exemplifies the American attitude towards the war. Here's our leading general, who I think was not very bright, saying, you know, counting bodies. Body count was crucial in Vietnam. It didn't matter if it was a civilian or not sometimes, but that was what added to the body count. And he was like saying, well, if we kill enough of them, how come they keep coming? And that was indeed what happened, because the Vietnamese kept replenishing themselves. I don't know how. They were like the ants. And that's true. And they could not solve this war through body count. And of course, his concern about uniforms and communications and discipline in the wrong sense of the word is what led us to this awful strategy of sending out troops as bait, always getting ambushed, and then trying to kill as many of them as possible. So it was an endless cycle. And then you'd give up the position, go back to base camp in your helicopters, and come back out a few days later and run into the same problem in some ways again. It was a cat and mouse game, but we were playing, our cat was like an elephant.
But this was a war that you signed up to serve in, specifically requesting combat duty.
Yeah.
Why did you do that?
Well, it's another story. I wrote a novel when I was 19, which was published 30 years later in 1997, Child's Night Dream, and I talk about that. I was at Yale University. I was in the class with George Bush, the class of 68. I dropped out. It was the people like Bush that drove me out. It was, I mean, I would say that it was a certain, you would know very well what I'm talking about, a sense of privilege, sense of entitlement. I just couldn't accept that. I had been through that East Coast thing most of my life. I'd competed, went to a great college, worked like a dog, was exhausted and wondered what it was all about, and basically didn't like the atmosphere at Yale. It was all men back then. And I left the first time to go to Vietnam. I became a teacher for 6 months of English in a high school, and then I went into the Merchant Marine. That's why I was asking you about Conrad. We were talking a bit about the literature. And I went into, Lord Jim had been a very big influence at that time in my life. I wanted to see what the Merchant Marine was like. Well, I got a whole heavy dose of it. I was a wiper, lowest job on the ship. But anyway, I came back and wrote this book, and the book had failed. And I really, although I loved literature, I just did not believe in what I couldn't go on with it. I went back to Yale. I flunked out because I was working on the book, and the dean said I had to go to class. I had zeros in all my classes, or I was failing everything. And I realized that my time had not come. I was just not ready to go to college, so I dropped out again. And I went to the Army because I wanted to go back to where I had been and see it on a ground level. I didn't want any special treatment. I didn't want to be an officer, which was offered to me. I didn't want anything. I didn't want to go to Germany or Korea. I wanted to see what the bottom of the barrel was like. In platoon, I mentioned that, and I wanted to be anonymous because I had brought, as a writer, you're thinking so much about yourself. You're so self-absorbed in your literary world that I wanted to get out of that forever, cleanse myself. So I ended up there in the military, survived, and went back to another combat unit, went back to the field again, did 15 full months, most of them in combat, and saw a lot of things, but came back, and I started taking pictures the last part of my tour, as much as I could, because you could keep the camera free from the rain. I mean, it was hard to keep paper, so I was taking as many pictures as possible. And that, I think, was a basis of a cinematographic impulse, a desire to be more visceral, not to come off the page. And I think it served me instead. Because eventually, after having difficulties readjusting to a civilian life, I went back to NYU Film School, which is more of a trade school than a classic education. And there I really started to marry the word and the image.
And you you just mentioned it there, that when you write, often it's easy to kind of focus solely on yourself and get into yourself.
Yeah. Oh no, this book you should read it. It's about a young man, and it's a very vivid illustration of a 19-year-old mind. And I loved it. I went back 30 years later, took a year and a half away from filmmaking to finish it in 1997. And it did me a lot of good, because I visited myself when I was younger, and I got to know him. And I think the book really is an insight into that kind of, it's an egocentric, you're at the center of the universe. You have to be at 19. It's sort of like you're figuring out your parents, you're figuring out, and the beginning of a long journey, as you know. My father, well, I don't know what you know, but basically it's the beginning of a long journey to the other side, which means the other side of yourself, wherever that lies. So if you start one place, you go to another. You have to, otherwise you haven't lived. I'm sorry for kids who stay the same. I'm sorry for kids who grow up in a certain environment and they never question it to a certain degree, and they just go on and on and on, with success or not.
And kind of keeping on the theme of writing about yourself, one of the perhaps most famous scripts you've written for Scarface was based on your own experiences, reportedly, with cocaine. Do you find it easier? With artistic license, I'm sure, but do you find it easier or more difficult to write about your own experiences?
Well, there's a bit of you in everything. When Midnight Express was prior to that, and I had incorporated my own experiences I had been busted when I came back from Vietnam. That was another nice thing about this. I saw the new world, the new society, the new, what they called at that time, America with a K. I was thrown into jail within 10 days of my return and charged with federal smuggling. And I was up for 5 to 20 years, and it was really a vivid the prison, as they are now, was completely overcrowded, way past capacity. Most of the people were young. Most of the people had been on drugs because it was a Mexican border near San Diego. It was a frightening experience. It just woke me up in certain ways to a new reality. The drug war was just beginning within that. Nixon was about to be elected. So prison played a role in Midnight Express, as you know. But with Scarface, I had fallen, after the success of that film, I had fallen into fallen is a strange word. I had embraced it with joyfully the cocaine culture in Hollywood. There was a lot of it. And people were having a ball and having it was a new experience. But I had taken psychedelics before that, certainly a fair share of it, and I'd certainly smoked a hell of a lot of grass. So cocaine was a detour in a way from what I thought were positive experiences. And I can't say in hindsight that I miss cocaine at all. I saw so many demons that so many people were really, I felt as a writer that I was destroying my mind, that my writing mind was not, my scripts were not as good. So I consciously pulled away, and I actually moved to France to write the Scarface after doing all the research, because that's when I had to go cold turkey, because I knew that my mind was not going to deal with it. So knowing what I did, I went cold turkey, because France at that time was not infested with it. So I was able in France, with my wife, who had the same problem as I had, to cut it off and write the script sober.
And if we may, I said we'd be jumping around, if that's okay.
Yeah, we're jumping around.
If we may fast forward to the present with your new film, Snowden, that's about to come out. You said something really interesting recently about how it was difficult to finance Snowden and finance production of the film. To quote, "It's a very strange thing to do, a story about an American man, and not be able to finance this movie in America. And that's very disturbing, if you think about its implications on any subject that is not overtly pro-American." Why is this the case for this movie and not the case for other movies you've made, which I think is fair to say are also hardly overtly pro-American?
Ron Kovic, for my example, who wrote Born on the 4th of July, was a highly motivated individual. He went to Vietnam and he was paralyzed. I don't know if you know the novel or the movie, but he was a patriot. Even that movie, and he was a boy from Massapequa, small town, America. That was a beautifully written script. And we could not get anywhere with it. It was all German money is what started to finance it. And that was in 1978 when I wrote it, 79 when I wrote it. It was canceled 2 weeks before production. So and because of those issues, the German money was suddenly, no studio supported it except reluctantly. So I finally made it 10 years later in 89 with Tom Cruise, who was a movie star. And even then, we were limited on the budget, and we were pressured. And people just in America are very. It's a culture, I don't know if you've traveled to America. It's a culture that you have to embrace, sort of the flag. I don't know how much. There's so much flag waving now. It's disproportionate. There's so much overpraise of the military, which I've been in, and everybody who serves is a hero. That's not the way it is in reality. And that's led to this overindulgence in war. We love militarism. We don't know it. We have always been, but we've become increasingly an aggressive military culture to solve problems, using military force and worship of the military. And I call it worship with the flyovers at the football games, the flags, the endless amount of say our heroes, our veterans, and we cut to these hospitals and you see all the veterans and disabled and miserable and struggling for television to keep a good face. You know, it's as Kovic said, it's a lie. We're lying to ourselves. The situation is terrible. The same veterans are coming back that we had in my day, and it's as tough as it ever was for anybody who loses something over there. Sometimes it's better to be killed. It's just it's a culture of self-congratulation that is lying to itself and leading to tragic consequences for the families too. I mean, you know what war does. So I say that advisedly. I know I'm not. I think something is mentally wrong. I got there because your original question, excuse me, was
about financing the new film Snowden.
So I mean, this issue has come up again and again in my life. Comandante, my documentary, which was an extraordinary interview with Fidel Castro, which we got, was taken off the air before it aired. 2 weeks before it was advertised by HBO. It was suddenly removed. They claimed for a recent political issue that occurred down there, not a big deal, but they had a reason to take it off. Never appeared again. This was because they got so much complaints from the right-wing Cuban community in Florida, which is extremely powerful and anti-communist to the max. So these are, it's been going on with me for a while. We were able to make JFK. It caused quite a furor. And after that, another scandal was natural-born killers, blah, blah. So I don't want to revisit them all, but Nixon, I picked a president that was not especially, he was divisive, put it that way, certainly. And by the time we made Any Given Sunday in 1999, even here we are at the Sacred Cow as football, and I thought we did a very interesting probe into it. We had no cooperation from the National Football League at all. We tried, but they wanted us to change so much in the script, including the injuries, the domestic abuse issues, the use of players, almost to work them to the death bone. Anyway, we arrived at this place where we made the movie. We had to use different uniforms, different teams, and create an alternate universe. What else? There was W. We won't talk about that somewhere else, but that's a Bush story. By the time we made Snowden, I guess I was a bête noire or something. I don't know. but nobody wanted to touch it. Not one studio. And they read the script. Script was reasonable. I thought it was good, and they thought so. And executives said, creative executives said, "We are interested. We want to see the script. We like the actors. We like the budget." 4 days, 5 days go by. No response. There's no talk about, no negotiation. Which means they went to the corporate boards upstairs, and each of these corporate boards, these are now, all these film companies have changed. They're all part of some conglomerate somewhere, and each of these conglomerates essentially said, "Don't touch it, don't touch them." This man was at that time regarded as a very dangerous subject matter, because he was seen as he was seen by many people as a traitor. So it was either that, or the other excuse was the documentary said everything we need to know, we don't need to know more, which is nice to say. It's a nice documentary, but there's so much more to say. Anyway, you never know why. No one ever tells you why, ever. So you have to live in, you just sense that the climate was hostile. We got our financing from France, we got it from Germany, and eventually we got the sales agent out of Europe was able to book enough sales for us to make the film. American company came in later, Open Road. They were very good. They were but a smaller company. An independent company. They last year they distributed Spotlight, and they did very well with it. So they're a very good company, and they had no hesitation. So we were distributed in America. We have no British sale yet. That's what's bizarre, considering. But I understand, given that most of Britain has accepted the surveillance state, but every other country in Europe has bought on.
But so can I take it from what you just said, then you don't think that Edward Snowden is a traitor at all?
I'm not going to tell you. I want you to go to the movie to find out my answer.
Would you describe yourself as a patriot?
Of course I am. I love America. I love what it can stand for. I did the Untold History of America in 2014. It was a 5-year deal for me. It was a nonprofit thing where I went back to graduate school, really, with my partner Peter Kuznick, who teaches American history for the last 30 years at American University. We're talking about the best of America in this history, and then we have many heroes in the movie who resound to me, starting with Roosevelt and Henry Wallace and John Kennedy. We repeatedly go back to good examples for American history, but we deal with the myths, and we puncture, I think, quite a few. This was a radical reinterpretation of American history, because my children and myself, I never got a good history education in America. I got all the flag waving. I got all the. But this is a hard look at what we did. A hard look from 1890s, when we started to go abroad in the Philippines and in Cuba, through the World War I, through Woodrow Wilson saying we have saved the world for democracy, after taking credit for winning World War I, when the empires were clashing to so much blood was shed in World War I, and then basically culminating in World War II, the bastard child of World War I, and from there on we accelerate into a global security state beyond any known proportion in human history.
And if we may just return to Snowden and also Born on the 4th of July, there seems to be a parallel there, the way in which you're able to secure, well, maybe not the way in which, but a major contributing factor to producing the film and getting it done was having the big name actors.
They're not big names, no. Joseph Gordon-Levitt is hardly a big name, but he's a good actor, and I wanted him for Snowden. He was my first choice because he resembled him in certain ways, and he had that attitude. And young, he's the same age, close. And I brought him to Moscow and I introduced them. And I thought it really vitalized, it galvanized him. And Shailene Woodley is a young actress who is coming, I think it will be a major star, but she was not hardly known to the public, so neither of them would be considered.
I think people would say Joseph Gordon-Levitt is a big name.
They what?
Don't you think? I would.
Well, to you, but not to the industry, no. He's a supporting.
Right.
But he's not considered a leading actor, except in lower budget films, which we were not. We were medium budget.
And he wasn't difficult to convince?
No, I went right to him. I told him, there's something about you. I told you, you're the first person I thought of, and I thought I'd bring it to you early. Are you interested? And given that he had apparently supported Ed Snowden already in his actions, he was very intrigued, and he said yes.
Wonderful, thank you. We'll now move to questions from the audience, if that's okay. So if you have a question, please raise your hand high in the air. If we could please come down to the front here.
Thank you very much. Given your sustained interest in Vietnam, I'm wondering what you would say to students looking to research there today, particularly in conflict prevention in this kind of era of climate change and that sort of thing, and also just how you feel in general about the West's continued involvement in Vietnam.
That's a question I've never heard before. What is your angle? Are you a climate scientist, or?
I'm going on a research trip,
right.
Which is really looking into the Mekong Delta and other locations, areas where people's lives are very likely to be influenced by climate change, and trying to look at how conflict can be prevented.
It's funny, I thought, I would think, having walked through all those areas where Agent Orange was dropped on us in huge quantities. I mean, we walked through rainbows of it. I'm sure I have some form of Agent Orange, whatever, but I haven't sued the Veterans Administration yet, but having seen so much of the devastation, because they were really out to, deforest the place so that they could see the enemy. That's the problem in these wars. But they didn't solve it by going to the desert, did they? They couldn't find them anyway. No, it's a complete breakdown in mental intelligence. I don't understand it. The climate. I thought the rainforest it was beautiful. Vietnam was beautiful, and I served in 3 of the 4 provinces, so I saw quite a lot. The A Shau Valley. I don't remember it being as bad as some of the places I saw in Middle East. And even in France after World War I, there was, as a young man, I saw a lot of devastation. I don't know. I'm not an expert on that, but I can't help you. I can say, it seems to me that Africa and the northern climates would be the much more threatened by climate extinction than Vietnam, which has enormous regrowth, so much regeneration of I drove through there a few years ago, and I was quite amazed at the way the forest comes back. I'm talking about the forest, especially from Saigon to Phnom Penh. And up through you go to Laos, you'll see that forest. And we bombed the shit out of Laos for 6 years, I believe, 7 years. It was horrible devastation. I haven't been to Laos recently. I would imagine they've come back, but do you know? I mean, I'm sure there are landmines there, but that's different. Have you been there? And? But the forest has come back.
Yeah. Which makes it more difficult to see.
Yeah, I understand.
And as to the West's continued involvement in Vietnam, is there a way it could be, positive, conducting research, that sort of thing? We've just got a terrible track history.
The West is tricky, and when you make a deal with the devil, you gotta sup with a long spoon. The United States would like Vietnam to be an ally. They don't care about what happened in the past. They want Vietnam as an ally because they want to contain China. And they see Vietnam as a valuable ally against China. I'm sure there's a lot of mixed opinion from the Vietnamese, but certainly a generation of Vietnamese, I'm told, have forgotten the past. Well, that's hard McNamara finally admitted that U.S. bombing killed 3.5 to 3.8 million Vietnamese. Plus, beyond that, the Viet Cambodians and the Cambodian War was started basically by us. It was caused by us. And the Laotian War, which was a secret war, there was many Laotians killed. So we owe a huge record out there. We have a record. Some people call it a genocide. But in any case, it was ruthless behavior. And I don't think the karma is very good from that. And I don't see anything good coming from an alliance like this. And I think it's for nefarious reasons. I don't think it's because we care about Vietnam. We care about money and power. And if we can make money with Vietnam, doesn't matter.
Thank you for your question. If we can please go to the member there in the grey top.
Thank you. My question is about directing as a profession. As I'm sure you know, it continues to be a very male-dominated profession, with notable exceptions like Catherine Bigelow, who has won an Academy Award for directing. And my question is, what advice would you give to women who would like to penetrate what continues to be a very male-dominated profession?
Well, I know that's a huge issue. I know Catherine when she was a young filmmaker. In fact, I produced one of her films, Blue Steel. I co-produced. So I've seen her journey, and my opinion may clash with the popular one, but my belief is that Hollywood is really gender blind and color blind. They don't see you, they see money. And it's all about that, the green, how green are you? And if you can deliver, it doesn't matter if you're a first-time filmmaker or a veteran. If they feel that there's money there and that's on paper, and there's a cast of some kind, and it might work, they'll give you that shot. Now, some people will say that's not true, I got screwed out of this, but that's the nature of the business. A lot of men also got screwed out of things. So, but I've always believed in writing. Writing is the core, and I think if you have it on paper, that will. Sometimes you have to be screwed the first time if you write it on paper, but the second time, if you can deliver, that woman, the woman who's done the Nancy Meyers, she's really an amazing job of one thing after another that made a fortune, you know. And she's a shrewd filmmaker, but she's gotten what she wanted out of the business, and created highly entertaining movies at the same time. May not be to your taste, but if you're going to come with something that's unexciting to them, it doesn't matter if you're male, female, black, white, Chinese, it doesn't matter.
Thank you for your question. If we can please go to the member in the beard. In the beard, with the beard.
Hi, thank you for coming. I don't know anything about filmmaking or writing, but like you, I spent some time in working in Western interventions, military interventions in Afghanistan and Western Africa. My question to you is, when I look at your movies, it seems like the themes are human weakness, lies, killings, etc. Do you think that we have more to learn from studying the dark side of humans than the nice sides?
I would agree with you. I think that I wouldn't have started the movie if it was only the dark side. I think that there's people in those movies who express love, who seek it. I do believe, and I am optimistic, that if you live by the standards of your heart, that what your conscience tells you, you can have a life and you can have a society around you of decent people. I think that most of the world is pretty decent people. I think that the leadership, and we go into detail on this in Untold History of the United States, all 12 hours. So leadership of this country has been askew. It's awful. It's an awful leadership. They should be run out of office. I don't understand how the perpetrators of Iraq II rather, are still there. The same media supporting them, the same people are back. They call themselves liberal interventionists like Hillary Clinton, or they call themselves neoconservatives. It doesn't matter. These people are running Washington. And they really compromised Obama considerably in those 8 years. They're still there. They're still plotting against Syria. These are malignant people. They should have been run out of office in any decent democracy. But the system doesn't work that way. And the American media has contributed to this continuing lie, contributed heavily, as has the English media, by the way, which is also, most of it seems to be owned by a few people, including Mr. Murdoch. But I hear the Daily Mail is even worse.
Is it too presumptuous to ask who you anticipate voting for in November?
There's not, well, right now, if you ask me directly, I would endorse Bernie Sanders. is the only one who has a chance to turn America around, to put it back on a human path, a path where we are not going to war, we're not intervening in foreign countries. And intervention is a big theme in America. You have to understand that I'm looking at it from a historical perspective where you really have to follow and understand that what the CIA has been doing since 1947 and realize how many countries we're involved in, and also economically, how many countries we are involved with. How many bases do we have abroad? 130 or 70 countries, 170 countries? Not quite sure anymore because they're secret bases everywhere. But since Mr. Bush father, and that was a huge mistake in 1989, put 500,000 US troops into the Mideast because of Hussein's invasion of Kuwait. Those 500,000 troops have never come back. We're out there. That was an enormous decision. And it was unexamined by the media because you have to remember 20 years before when Mr. Johnson sent 500,000 troops to Vietnam, that was a huge issue. Huge issue. It was a big number. And not since World War II had we done something like this. So the students came out, the protesters came out in big numbers. But in 1989, in 1991, when we went to war with Hussein, it was unexamined, and it went by smoothly, and it was celebrated as a victory. You have to re-examine all that period because that was the period in which the Soviet Union disappeared as our supposed enemy in 1991. 1991 should have been the peace dividend. We never got it. The United States never stopped building this military-industrial complex. They kept right on going.
And if Hillary Clinton gets the nomination as is expected?
I don't know. You may be wrong. There's always surprises in politics. She's definitely endorsed all these wars. She was all for Syria and all for Libya and all for Iraq and Afghanistan, and whatever she claims, she's a warmonger. And she certainly has. She recently told Israel that she would go even further than America's ever gone in support of Israel. In view of the fact that what we've done for Israel, it's just shocking. What more can we do? It's reached a place where nothing is examined on this regard. It's not examined. So, if you don't learn from history, history is going to teach you again.
For another question from the audience now. Can we please go right to the back? I can see nothing except that you're at the back.
Thank you very much. I would like to ask a question about your film on Alexander.
Would you be able to speak a bit louder, please? Sorry.
I'd like to ask a question about the film on Alexander.
Yeah.
And I know that your chief advisor, or one of your advisors, was Professor Robin Lane Fox of Oxford University. And I watched one of his interviews because he's very interesting. And he said that he asked you to allow him to lead some of the cavalry charges in the film instead of or apart from compensation. So my question is, have you ever been asked for something so weird?
Oh, believe me, I've been asked so many different weird things, but I love Robin Lane Fox. He teaches here. He's written a new book, a fabulous, what a journey on Augustine, on St. Augustine, the opposite of Alexander. But Augustine despised Alexander. But he's a big, broad, he loves drama, and created a great book in Alexander. He wrote it as a young man, 1973, I believe. I was fascinated by it and bought the rights to it. I also had read all the Mary Renault books, and although they were drama, historical drama, they were in the right spirit, and I used a lot of that. So we went on a long journey, and it hasn't quite ended for me, you understand, because the film was released in 2004, and I was unhappy because it was my fault. I accepted the rush conditions, and we had very little time to edit the film, and it didn't do as well as I'd hoped. But I went back in 2007 and did a DVD new version, and then in 2014, 10 years after the release, I did another version of Alexander, the ultimate cut, which I wish was available in England. It is available on Amazon in the US. So it is a huge effort. I made the film longer with an intermission, and I made it the way it should have been made. With the original distributor, I was really pressured to cut the sex and the homosexuality, and especially the Begowis stuff, the eunuch stuff, and the violence too. They were very much did not want at that time. Now they are, but things have changed. But it's also my timing was terrible. I mean, we were invading Babylon. We were invading Iraq at the same time, whereas Alexander had gone to Babylon and beat the Persian Empire and became the emperor of the Persian Empire as well. So it was quite a horrible timing to release that movie. Robin led the charge, and he learned a lot on the movie because he loves horses, he loves hunting, fox hunter, and he learned the sarissa. When you hold these long lances, they're really long. You have to be very strong, and he understood a lot from that. And he came to me afterward. The dust alone that we were raising in the desert of Morocco matched the dust of Gaugamela. And you can't see where you're going is basically it. And the battle, I've been told by many historians, is as accurate as they've seen in any movie to what they think happened at the battle. Of course, what we think we know and what actually happened is a question. But there's no question, that was the first time, one of the first times that Alexander used cavalry to decide the battle. That had never been done before. And his cavalry broke the Persian Empire, which was, the battle was, they were outnumbered tremendously. How is Robin? Anybody know? He was supposed to be here later.
Well, thank you for your question. I look for another question now, please. If we could go to the end there in the red.
Could you please talk a bit about your creative process?
Briefly, I don't want to bore everyone. Research, and then let it go. I'm doing historical dramatization. I am taking the essence of what I think is the truth and trying to get it through in 2 hours. I'm taking an enormous amount of information, condensing it, simplifying it for film purposes, but not losing the essence of the truth. This is true in all these films, whether it was JFK or Snowden. Snowden comes to mind because I am not a computer expert by any means. In fact, it kind of bores me, but I got a dosage of it. I mean, there's so much that I had to research with my co-writer that my head was spinning, and at the end of the day, we shot a lot of it, but we lost about 30% of it, because why? It turns out to be kind of boring, and people are not as impressed when they see it on the screen as you are impressed when you get it, because you understand the mental breakthrough. So it's very tricky to shoot computer movie. And I didn't want to falsify. I don't have any chases, I don't have any shootings, there's no murders in the movie. It is as realistic as we could make it, but we probably heightened a few things and dramatized a few things. We had to. Is that answered enough for now?
Thank you for your broad question. If we could please go, there's someone who's kind of flashing with the hand. Yeah, there we go.
You mentioned your belief that Hollywood is gender blind and race blind, especially for directing. However, what are your thoughts on the fact that only white actors were nominated in the Academy Awards this year? Is it because of merit or barriers to entry?
Yeah, there'll be no end to that discussion. I mean, you have to remember how, on the other side of the equation, as I said to the young lady earlier, cash is blind. And they want good ideas. And if you can provide what they want, they'll go with it. It's very difficult still for anybody, a male or female, to get a movie made. Very difficult. Look at my struggles. With all the supposed successes I've had, it seems sometimes that you start with zero. It's a memory, the memory is not there. And a lot of people don't have good memory. They don't remember you. So I sound like I'm apologizing. I don't have to apologize. When I grew up, there was enormous presence of the black actors in Hollywood. They were growing and growing. It was clear to me. I went through Sidney Poitier when he was doing movies more and more. And at that point, when Stanley Kramer made Guess Who's Coming to Dinner, that was a big thing for America. You have to take things in relative perspective. During the 70s, the 1970s, black television boomed. The huge amounts of money were made off Bill Cosby, off The Jeffersons, off Sanford and Son. Red Fox Eddie Murray became a huge movie star. Richard Pryor was a huge movie star. I mean, they were receiving the maximum because they were hot, and black humor was discovered. And that has proceeded, you know. There's been television. Jamie Foxx came from so many shows, you know, and movies. Now, in the 1970s, there was a huge black exploitation trend, enormous success. The Shaft movies among them, but there were many other kinds, and many athletic heroes made. And the television shows were integrated. Cosby was in a show with Culp. You know, it wasn't an issue. It was just going on. And 2-3 years ago, what was it? The 12 Years a Slave was the best picture. All the actors have received victory awards, although that's not the judge of it. But Jamie Foxx, Will Smith should have been nominated, but he has been nominated several times. Denzel Washington. I mean, I'm not even including so many names, but there was. And the comedies, the Kevin Hart stuff, and I can't keep track of it. Ice Cube, it's been a lot of movies, and they make money. That's all it's about. So they keep making them. Now, the fact that a few people you don't think should have won Oscars this year didn't make it has caused this scandal. Beats me. It seems like it's incited by anger that's deeper than just. Because these choices, every year, people's hearts get broken. There's a lot of Academy Award nominees or people who should have been nominated, white, black, female, male, that just don't get it. And it's part of the game. It's part of the, you have to realize the Academy Awards are not the only judge of value. They're a popularity contest to a large degree. It's like going back to high school and being in a high school election. You know, who's going to be student president of the class? You know, it's not really a fair election, and I never saw it as such. I think I was extraordinarily lucky because I came along at the time they didn't know who I was. I was a Vietnam veteran. That suddenly became hot. Okay, give him an Oscar. I got a second Oscar. They were shocked, and then, you know, like, we don't want to hear from him for a while. You know, so it happens. It happens. So I sound like, you know, probably you don't want to hear that, but I don't know what to do. You can't give Oscars to people for things that you don't particularly admire. You can't. You have to vote your conscience, and I don't know Hollywood people are the last people to go to. On the other hand, because they don't think like that. They tend to be far more liberal than the rest of America. When you talk about Ferguson and you talk about cities, then you're on to something. But you don't, not at the Oscar level. In Ferguson, what's happened in America is horrifying. The jailing of black men and black women, the criminalization process has deepened through the 1990s. Clinton also has the Clintons have a large role in this. The belief in the 3 strikes you're out kind of system. And militarization of the police force. This I've seen constantly. I've traveled a lot of small towns. In fact, we were involved in a riot where they arrested one of our black actors. It was ridiculous. And before you know it, you know, the cops have every kind of equipment now. The Pentagon gives them, basically they even give them tanks, APCs, Humvees that you can't believe that are built for Iraq to withstand the force of an IED. These weapons, what do you need a Humvee for in the streets of Ferguson? This is going on all over America. This is because of the war mentality. There's a callousness in our society. That's much more important to me, is the callousness that bounces back from Vietnam, bounces back from Iraq I, Iraq II. The easy acceptance of huge bombings, drone strikes. It's like a game, a video game to Americans. I've traveled enough, and I've been in a war. The Russians have been through a war. They know what it means. The France and England have been through wars. There's, I think, more memory in the DNA of what it's like to have a whole generation, half of a generation wiped out in France. And in England, you suffered huge casualties. There has to be a memory for compassion to exist, for empathy to exist. So I worry about the States because most people have not experienced war, and they accept too easily violence.
Thank you for your question. We've got time for perhaps 2 more questions. If we could please go to the member there.
You mentioned some of your television, such as documentary, and you have worked on television in the past. But I was wondering, given the supposed renaissance in the television industry caused by on-demand services and cable, whether you actually considered doing more of your work through television rather than the more difficult to finance, perhaps?
Well, that's a good question, and certainly it's on your mind. I hope it helps you because you're coming up, and people who want to start can have a better chance maybe of getting through the TV racket. But it's a racket, and don't kid yourself. Whenever there's a new baby discovered, the people who get there first, make the most money. So it plays out that way. The problem is, for example, I like movies because I like to hear the story in 2 hours. I understand that sometimes you need 10 hours to hear it, or if you pad it out, you can go several seasons and make a fortune. And because you're repeating, you're giving the people what they want. I understand that. But most films, I'm a person who likes to read a book and get it done and have a movie and see the whole, where it resolves. For example, this year, Big Short is a great example for me of a movie that worked. I'm surprised it worked. It worked at the level it did and presented a very intelligent, suspenseful movie in 2 hours. But if you look at the book by Michael Lewis, The Big Short, is a natural for television. That's one, oh yeah, we can do this for 10 hours, we can make more money. So that's where the problem lies, because you're getting more and more of these padded shows where you're making something into 10 hours, and it bores me. Because come on, move on, I get it. They're stylish, they're better shot by cameramen who shoot features and so forth. But it's not the solution for me. It makes the first draft longer. In other words, everything in the news right now, everything is going to be shot for television, I predict. And it won't be good, most of it, because it will be a first draft of history, like a journalistic account. So you have to go deeper, and that's what makes movies interesting, because once you get to a movie, usually years later, you really can go in there and try to see the patterns at work. But you're going to get a lot of this O.J. Simpson, this happened, this murder, that murder. It's going to be a ton of that, and I think it's really going to defeat its own purpose. But the new distributors are interesting, but do you want to see a movie on your home screen, or do you want to see it in the theater? This is a decision that many people are going to have to make. I prefer to see it in certain movies I want to see on a home screen, but most of them that I like, I really want to see, I want to save for a theater. But I'm old-fashioned.
Thank you for your question. There are one final question. If we could please go down here.
Thank you. You mentioned that studios are predominantly motivated by money. I'd be interested, what is your motivation? What keeps you going in making new movies?
The truth, what do you think? I'm a Virgo. I don't know if you know those astrological signs. I've always had a thing about, gotten in a lot of trouble trying to say, well, Dad, Mom, it's not what you say it is, And my parents were married, and they told me they were very happy together. And I suppose at that young age you believe it, and I really was shocked when they divorced. And that's a good example of white lies, which is what you hear. And when you get to school, all you hear is white lies about history. And I think the smarter ones start to figure it out, or they question, or else they go off into mathematics or some specialty where they don't want to hear about it. But I think it's a great delusion. So I've been haunted, increasingly so, but you realize I grew up very conservative. My father was a Republican through and through, an Eisenhower man. I was taught to hate Roosevelt. I was taught to despise Castro. John Kennedy was a bad guy. So all this turned gradually in my world. I went to the other side of the in many ways, the universe, Einstein was right, it wobbles. You know, I'm still learning. But I grew enormously after the Vietnam War by listening to people, talking to many people such as yourself, many women informed me of things I never thought of, you know, about their where they are and what they're being treated like and so forth. But that goes on through your lifetime. You don't know what you're going to learn next. I've reached a place where I love my father, but I realized that he was limited by his conditions and he never went beyond those certain conditions. I hope too. That's what I'm motivated by. So that's why I hope I keep renewing, because I keep renewing my learning and my consciousness grows.
Thank you very much for your question, and thank you to everyone who has asked a question this evening.
Thank you.
If you could all please remain seated as our guest leaves and join me in thanking, for the final time, Mr. Oliver Stone.